Ever wish you could just hit the pause button on life? Like when everything's going a mile a minute and all you crave is some serious peace and quiet.
Yeah, I know that feeling. It's like everyone's looking for that off switch, especially when things get hectic.
Totally. And you know, that longing, that search for inner peace, it's what brings us to our deep dive today. We're tackling jhana.
Jhana.
It's a fascinating area in Theravada Buddhist meditation, all about reaching these profound states of absorption. Think of it as a set of practices, really fine-tuned techniques for cultivating deep serenity.
And maybe even the bit more than just serenity, right?
Absolutely. Clarity, wisdom, the whole package.
Yeah.
And luckily, we've got a great guide for our deep dive today. We'll be looking at excerpts from the Jhanas in Theravada Buddhist meditation by Hanapola Gunaratana.
Sounds like a plan.
But before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's make sure we're on the same page. What exactly is jhana? Why is it such a big deal, especially in Theravada Buddhism?
Well, people sometimes think of it as just zoning out. But that doesn't really do it justice. It's really more like this powerful unification of the mind. Think of your mind getting so absorbed, so focused, that distractions just fade away. That's the heart of jhana.
So, not your average daydream, then?
Not even close. It's way more intentional, way more powerful. And the reason it's so important in Theravada Buddhism is that this tradition is all about a practical, down-to-earth approach. They see jhana as this incredibly effective tool for walking the path toward enlightenment.
A tool that probably requires a fair bit of, well, let's call it training, because Gunaratana doesn't exactly paint jhana as this easy breezy shortcut to inner peace.
Definitely not a shortcut. It's a process, and like any good process, it needs the right groundwork. He actually uses a great analogy in the book, compares preparing for jhana to cleaning a muddy pond. Before you can see those clear reflections at the bottom, you've got to let the mud settle.
Okay, I like where you're going with this. So what's the mental mud, so to speak?
They call them the Five Hindrances. And trust me, these are things we all deal with. Things like craving for sensual pleasures, that little voice of ill will that pops up sometimes.
Or how about just plain laziness?
Oh, for sure. Can't forget that one. Or restlessness, or doubt. Those are biggies.
Wow, you're really hitting close to home with these. It's like you just described my entire week. But I get it. Makes sense that you'd need to address those things before you can even begin to approach something like jhana.
Exactly. Solid foundation, remember.
Yeah.
Gunaratana talks about sila, the importance of ethical conduct, mental discipline. You wouldn't try to climb Mount Everest without the proper gear and some serious training.
Not if I wanted to actually reach the summit.
Precisely. And Jhana, in many ways, is its own kind of mental ascent. It's gradual, something you work towards.
So, sticking with that climbing analogy, let's say we've got our base camp set up. We've done some training. What's next? We need a good guide, someone who's been there before, right?
You're telling me. You want someone who knows the terrain, who can show you the ropes. And Gunaratana introduces this idea of a Kalyanamitta, basically, a qualified meditation teacher. Think of them as your Jhana Sherpa.
Love it. A Chana Sherpa makes the whole thing a lot less intimidating. So what exactly does a Chana Sherpa do? They carry our mental baggage up the mountain for us.
Now, wouldn't that be nice? Sadly, no. But what they do provide is the tools and the techniques that best suit you. And here's where it gets really interesting. Imagine you've got this whole toolkit for meditation, and inside you've got 40 different tools.
Wait, 40?
40 different techniques, each one designed for cultivating jhana. They're called Kammatthana.
Okay, that's amazing. But talk about options overload. How do you even begin to choose?
Well, that's where your Jhana Sherpa comes in. They'll work with you, help you understand your own tendencies, your strengths and weaknesses, and from there they'll guide you toward the Kammatthana that resonates most deeply with you.
So it's personalized.
Absolutely. It's not one size fits all. It's about finding what works.
That makes a lot of sense. But can you give me an example? What are some of these jhana tools, these Kammatthana, all about?
Sure. Some of them, known as the kasinas, they involve focusing on elements, earth, fire, that kind of thing. Others use visualizations of the body. There's even Kammatthana that focus on contemplating the Buddha's teachings or cultivating compassion. The variety is pretty incredible, but the aim is always the same: to refine your attention, to lead you toward that deep state of absorption.
This is fascinating, but I have to admit, my mind's starting to feel a bit like that muddy pond we were talking about earlier. So we've got our tools, we've got our trusty guide, but how do these Kammatthana, these practices, actually lead to experiencing jhana? What's going on in the mind when you're engaging with these techniques?
Great question. It takes us right into the mechanics of jhana. Gunaratana actually breaks it down into 5 key factors that come into play as you move deeper into these states of meditation.
You know what? I think a little mental breather is a good idea. Those Kammatthana definitely have my attention. But tell me more about these 5 factors Gunaratana talks about. What are they and how do they actually work to bring about jhana?
It's almost like putting together the perfect mental cocktail.
Hmm.
The first ingredient, applied thought. That initial push to direct your attention to the meditation object. Could be your breath, a visualization, whatever you're working with.
Right, like choosing the right tool from that toolkit and figuring out where to use it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then comes sustained thought. This is where you're really putting in the effort. Maintaining that focus,
Yeah.
gently bringing your attention back every time it wanders off. You're strengthening that connection to the object.
Sounds like the mindfulness part everyone's always talking about. Honestly, that's where I struggle the most.
It's a common hurdle.
Hmm.
But when you can stick with it, that's when things get really interesting. Because that sustained attention allows the next factor to arise. Rapture.
Rapture. Okay, now we're talking. That's way more exciting than just watching my breath.
Rapture, or Piti in Pali. It's this intense joy, this delight that can emerge when the mind starts to settle. It's that aha moment. The deep satisfaction of just being present.
I can see how that would make you want to linger in meditation.
It's definitely alluring. And as that rapture deepens, it often leads to the next factor, happiness, or sukha. This one's more tranquil. A pervasive sense of well-being that just kind of washes over the entire experience.
So we've gone from focusing our attention to experiencing this incredible joy and contentment, but there's still one piece missing, right?
Right, you are. The final factor is one-pointedness, that unwavering focus we touched on earlier. And as that rapture and happiness arise, they naturally help to unify the mind, draw it in, until it becomes fully absorbed in the object of meditation.
So it's like all these factors, they're feeding into each other. You focus, it creates space for joy and contentment, which then fuel this incredibly focused state of mind. It's like climbing a mountain. With every step, the view just gets more breathtaking.
What a perfect way to put it. That sense of awe, that expansion. That's the essence of the first jhana.
Wait, so there's more than one type of jhana?
Oh, we're just getting started. Remember, this is a gradual climb. And just like a mountain has multiple peaks, there are actually 4 levels of what are called fine material jhanas, each one progressively refining the mind and deepening that sense of serenity.
So it's not like you reach the first jhana and boom, you've peaked in the bliss department.
Think of it more like reaching base camp. You acclimated, got your bearings. Now the real adventure begins.
Okay, you've definitely got my attention. Tell me more. What awaits us at these higher jhanas?
Well, in the second jhana, that initial rush of rapture, that ecstatic joy, it begins to subside. And in its place comes this deep inner confidence and tranquility, and even stronger unification of mind, like reaching that flow state when you're completely engrossed in something you love, but magnified tenfold.
That sounds pretty amazing. But what about that sense of happiness? Does that disappear too?
It actually transforms. In the third jhana, the focus shifts to a profound sense of equanimity. It's like this deep, unwavering stillness arises. And even though that initial rapture has faded, there's still this subtle sense of happiness pervading the experience.
Okay, this is where my mind starts to feel like that muddy pond again. What exactly is equanimity and why is it so important?
It's a great question. Equanimity is often described as this balanced awareness. You're no longer being tossed and turned by the ups and downs of life. Like watching the waves on the ocean, you can appreciate their power and movement without getting swept away. And this equanimity, it's crucial because it allows you to experience the world with greater clarity and wisdom.
That makes a lot of sense. In that state of calm, you can actually see things for what they are. But we were talking about the third jhana, and I'm guessing the journey doesn't end there.
You're catching on. Each jhana builds on the last, refining the mind even further. And in the fourth jhana, even that subtle experience of pleasure and happiness falls away.
Wait, so that profound peace and contentment, we're leaving that behind.
It might seem strange, but what takes its place is even more profound. It's a state of pure equanimity, incredibly refined and purified awareness. Like you've stripped away all the layers of mental clutter, and what remains is this pristine, clear awareness.
Wow, that sounds incredible, almost superhuman. But I have to ask, is this the peak? Are there even more jhanas to explore?
Believe it or not, we've only scratched the surface. Beyond these 4 fine material jhanas, there are 4 more, even more rarefied states. The immaterial jhanas.
Okay, now we're really going off the map here. Immaterial jhanas, what does that even mean?
Well, to understand that, we need to look at how these jhanas connect to the Buddhist concept of rebirth.
Right, it's all coming together now. Samsara, realms of existence, karmic credit, the whole shebang. But how do these material jhanas fit into all of that?
Here's where it gets really interesting. Remember how we were talking about jhana being like this powerful form of karmic credit? Well, attaining even these fine material jhanas can lead to rebirth in incredibly pleasant heavenly realms.
Oh, right. Like leveling up in the cosmic game based on your meditation skills.
Hmm.
So where do these immaterial jhanas come in?
The immaterial jhanas are said to be so refined, so beyond our ordinary experience, that they can lead to rebirth in realms that transcend even the subtlest forms of material perception. Realms of pure consciousness, boundless space, even nothingness itself.
Whoa. Okay, my mind's doing backflips now. Realms of pure consciousness. That's a lot to wrap my head around. And to think that these states are accessible through meditation, that's pretty mind-blowing.
It's definitely a lot to take in. And here's the fascinating thing. Even these incredibly refined jhanas, as incredible as they sound, they don't represent the ultimate goal in Buddhism.
Wait, really? There's something even more desirable than being reborn into a realm of pure consciousness and bliss. I have to admit, I'm having a hard time imagining that.
Well, you see, in Buddhism, true liberation isn't about escaping to some heavenly realm, no matter how blissful it might be. It's about something far more profound. It's about waking up to the true nature of reality and breaking free from the cycle of suffering altogether.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do we get from these jhanas, these incredible meditative states, to that ultimate liberation? What's the
Yep.
missing piece?
That is the million-dollar question. And it all comes down to understanding the difference between two kinds of jhana, mundane and supramundane, and the crucial role that wisdom plays in all of this.
All right, I'm ready to dive in. Let's talk about this difference between mundane and supermundane jhanas. What's the distinction and how do they relate to this ultimate liberation we're talking about?
Okay, so mundane and supramundane jhanas, and this idea that even those blissful states aren't the ultimate goal. I'm with you, but I'm going to need some help unpacking all of this.
Happy to break it down. It really is a key distinction in Buddhism. Those jhanas we've been talking about, those states of peace and absorption, those are considered mundane.
Mundane sounds kind of, I don't know, almost a little bit dismissive for something so amazing. What makes them mundane?
Well, in this case, mundane just means worldly. It's not a bad thing, not at all. They're incredibly beneficial, cultivate peace, clarity, even joy. But they're still bound to the realm of conditioned experience, like a taste of liberation, but not the whole feast. Okay, I think I'm starting to see the bigger picture here. You can experience these amazing states, but there's an even deeper level of awakening possible, one that goes beyond those experiences.
You got it.
Yeah.
And to get there, there's another key ingredient, wisdom, paññāña in Pali. That ability to see reality as it truly is without our usual filters and distortions.
Wisdom, right.
Yeah.
Everyone talks about it, but it can feel so abstract. How do you actually develop that kind of wisdom, that paññā?
That's where the two vehicles of practice come in.
Yeah.
Samathiana and Vipassanayana. Serenity and insight. Two paths.
Like two different routes up that same mountain we were talking about earlier, both leading to the summit, but taking different approaches.
Exactly. With Samathiana, the path of serenity, jhana is your base camp.
Yeah.
You cultivate deep calm and concentration, and from that stable place, you start to develop wisdom through insight meditation.
So you're using the clarity and stability of jhana to investigate the nature of reality. Is that where practices like contemplating impermanence or suffering come in?
Exactly. Gunaratana talks about comprehension knowledge.
Yeah.
You're not just experiencing jhana, you're turning your attention towards it, observing it with this new clarity, and you begin to see even those blissful states, they're impermanent. They rise and fall like everything else.
Not clinging, but
Yeah.
using them as stepping stones. What about Vipassanayana, though, the insight path? That one's more direct, right? Like tackling the mountain head on.
You could say that. The Passanaya practitioner goes straight for cultivating mindfulness and insight. They're not necessarily using jhana as a prerequisite. They develop a different kind of concentration, a momentary concentration that comes from paying close attention to the present moment.
So constantly observing, noticing that everything is in flux. And it's that direct experience that leads to insights. But both paths, they ultimately lead to those supramundane experiences, which I guess is another way of talking about enlightenment.
Yes. And this is where it all ties together. Each stage of awakening, all the way to full enlightenment, to arahantship, involves a momentary experience of supramundane jhana. But there's a key difference.
What's different about this supermundane jhana?
Well, here jhana isn't just a peaceful state of mind. It's completely infused with wisdom, that direct understanding we've been talking about. Like the summit isn't just one peak, but a whole series, each more magnificent than the last.
Wow. It's amazing to think about that even within the realization of enlightenment, there's still this deep peace and absorption. But you mentioned something earlier that I've been wondering about. different types of noble disciples, people who've reached enlightenment, and how some of them might not have experienced all the jhanas. That seems surprising. Wouldn't you expect a fully enlightened being to have mastered it all?
It's an understandable assumption,
Yes.
but it just goes to show how much diversity there is on this path. Ganaratana actually describes 7 different types of noble disciples, each with their own unique experiences and characteristics.
So different approaches, different strengths, but ultimately the same destination.
Beautifully put. Some might use ropes, some might free solo, but that view from the top is the same. It's about finding the path that resonates with you. And that brings us to a final thought. The Buddha himself described jhana as a kind of nibbana here and now. But is true peace and happiness about these blissful states, even the most refined ones? Or is there a deeper liberation, one that goes beyond even the bliss of jhana, one available in each and every moment?
That's a pretty profound question to end on. Are we looking for refuge in those temporary states? Or are we looking to uproot the very causes of suffering, to experience a freedom that doesn't depend on any state of mind?
It's a journey we're all on. And maybe through exploring jhana, cultivating wisdom, learning from those who've gone before us, maybe we can start to uncover the answer for ourselves.
What a perfect note to end on. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the world of jhana. Until next time, may your journeys be filled with peace, clarity, and the courage to keep exploring.